Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling. I shall see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today, where we have a nice relaxing time ahead of us. Had a pretty good stream. We finished off Is the Seat Taken, which I don't know if I'll talk about today. Maybe I'll talk about on a different day or something. I haven't really thought through. I mean, it was just a very sweet. I mean, I'll give you my review. It's a very sweet, simple puzzle game. It's got a really nice appeal, I think, to it. It's not very complicated, I would say. Like, only some of the later levels start getting a little bit complicated, but it's more complicated because it's a game where you need to pass a lot of information every level. Not so much at its actual puzzles or too difficult, I think, which is nice because it sits in a very nice sort of intermediary of puzzles. So, good evening, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 8:26 p.m. on Sunday, March 15th, 2026. But yeah, how long did it take me to beat? It took me 4.5 hours to beat. And yeah, it genuinely is just a very sweet game. So yeah, if you want, I actually think it's a really, and would I say it's a great intro puzzle game? That's an interesting point. Maybe. I would say it's not a bad one. But anyway, that's that. Well, actually, what I was going to talk about today, I completely forgot, was the fact I watched Project Hail Mary yesterday, Ryan Gosling film. I loved it. I actually really, really enjoyed it. It might be one of my favourite sci-fi films. I won't spoil it entirely, because I feel like it's something which maybe I'll actually read a book for at some point. But the long and short of it is, I went in completely blind. I knew literally nothing about this, haven't even seen a trailer for it. The only thing I know was I seen the movie poster up in some of the train stations about, so I guess I knew Ryan Gosling was in it, and it looked like a sci-fi movie. And I guess I also knew that one of my friends had read it. That's about it. That's all the information I went in. But it turns out it's basically actually like a really heartwarming, wholesome story. It's a popcorn flick. It's like easy watching, you know? Like, and it's not to the level of like extreme stress or duress or horror, fear or anything. Like, like you feel sad, you do feel like angry or scared sometimes, but it's not like extreme, is what I'd say. So I would genuinely recommend it because I think it is genuinely pretty easy. Like, it's got a nice appeal, and it was way more comedic than I thought it was going to be. Because I went in thinking, oh, it's going to be a really dark, dreary, like dramatic. Basically, here's the minor plot synopsis, which I don't think matters if you go in blind for. If you know before you go in, is that it's about someone who's in space by themselves trying to save the world, essentially. And it is that, but it is like a lot more as well. It's like, I can't tell you why, I suppose, because that I think is better to go blind for. Because I was like, what? When it happened. And there's another much later point, which is even more like a whoa, when it happened. But again, even if you do know them, I don't think it ruins the plot for this game. Oh, colourful shovel. We finally got it back. Sorry, for this movie. Because it's, like, it's not too crazy. One thing I also mentioned about with my friend is like the fact that it's a sci-fi movie and it doesn't like, this is a thing I always say. I'm not a true scientist or anything. I like science, maths and science, and I would say I have above average high school knowledge or secondary school knowledge of science, because I did study them in secondary school, but I didn't take it to my degree or anything. So not like I know anything on a super in-depth level. But I know things well enough to be able to be like, okay, during a movie is like, does that even sound like remotely plausible or something? Well, okay, to me it doesn't have to be plausible, because if it was plausible, it would just be how it works in real life, I suppose. Or like, if it was correct, it would be how it works in real life. But plausible would be like, if you sort of hand wave, it's like, I guess it's like, I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for it because it sounds right. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. It sounds basically right enough, is the way I describe it. That's kind of like my thinking with a lot of science-based things and a lot of science-based movies. What the heck? A lot of science-based movies don't fulfill that. They sort of go like a bit like iffy. I keep picking up the wrong thing. I wish it would prioritize weeds rather than furniture items, but whatever. Which is totally fine. Like, I don't mean to say I'm like some sort of pinnacle of a modern day movie watcher. to be like, oh yeah, this is exactly how things should be, one way or another. But yeah, it is a sort of thing which I do consciously find myself doing, where I'm like watching a movie being like, okay, that doesn't even make any sense. It's sort of like there's invisible suspension of disbelief I have with scientific things in movies, to be like, does it sound like plausible enough that I could believe it? Like, I could see a world where if, you know, the laws of reality were slightly different, this would make sense. Because I think one example I like to use is Ant-Man, Marvel's one. Like, how does it work to be able to shrink and grow things like that? And the logic they explain is like, okay, things are able to shrink because it basically, this Pym's particle has some sort of special property where it allows atoms to basically come together closer. Like, it reduces the space between atoms. Does that sound hand-wavy enough that I could suspend my disbelief for it? Yes, I would say. I'm like, yeah, that seems like it's taking something basis in reality that, you know, atoms are actually a lot of empty space. And it sort of like tries to use it in a way which, even though it doesn't make sense to the rules of a world, like our world, it sounds like it would be like if you break this rule, if you change an axiom of physics in this world, would this be a consequence of it? It sounds plausibly so. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of consequences for what happens if you basically reduce the space down in atoms, but those are consequences which I don't know about. Like, I must imagine there's something to do with like either the nuclear force is probably doing something very weird if everything is now close together in an atom, but whatever. But the thing which always gets me about Ant-Man is that it has that, and it says it, and it's like, okay, and because of that, everything is the same density. Well, not the same density, sorry, it contains the same mass still, so things increase a lot in density, of course, when they shrink, so they retain their weight, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense as well. But then the movie goes ahead and continuously breaks this rule multiple times. The most egregious, I think, is when Hank Pym is just carrying a tank on a keychain, and you're like, okay, so he's just literally carrying a tank around, like with the full weight of a full tank, just on a keychain. Like, you can't have it both ways. Like, if you're going to try and commit to doing something which you try and explain using real world, like, mechanics and physics and stuff, but, like, hand waving it to break it to make these supernatural things real, you gotta commit, you know? You gotta think it through. You can't break, it has to be consistent with your own rules. Otherwise, in my mind, you might as well just be like, it's just magic. I mean, I'll be like, yeah, okay, I can just believe that. Like, because magic doesn't exist in our world. Like, it's so much easier for me to just, like, I think from my perspective, will be like, oh, Ant-Man, how does it work? It's not scientific at all. It's just magic. Then I'd be like, yeah, sure. But if you do it from a scientific perspective, it's like something in my brain kicks in, being like, all right, come on, put your money where your mouth is. And even then, like, there's a certain level of arrogance I think I carry when I say that, because obviously I'm not a scientist. I don't poke holes or flaws in every single thing. I'm just like, it just needs to be convincing enough for me, my, like, amateurish scientific brain to understand it. So anyway, this was a really long run to basically be like, Project Hail Mary does it, like, plausibly well, I would say. Like, I think it actually, if anything, raises some interesting thought experiments. So I guess I'm talking about Project Hail Mary now, so I'm going to completely spoil the entire thing. So if you don't want to be spoiled by it, stop watching. I would recommend you go watch it. I actually quite like it. I think it's very enjoyable. But the science behind it is interesting. So basically the threat they have is they have a thing called astrophage, which is eating the sun, quote, quote. What's it doing? It's basically absorbing the electromagnetic radiation from the sun, and then I can't remember how it emits it. Like, it absorbs it with, like, carbon dioxide as well, and it emits it. I'm like, okay, that seems like not the most unusual thing. It's, like, not too different to a variant of, like, photosynthesis, essentially. But I can't remember what it emitted afterwards. I think it emitted nothing, or like it definitely didn't emit some sort of electromagnetic radiation, which causes a problem because these things breed like crazy, and then it seems like the sun is basically slowly dimming because of it. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if it makes that much sense, but it's like hand wavy enough where I'm like, okay, maybe I can sort of buy into it a little bit, because I guess the sun is just emitting like its electromagnetic radiation anyway. It's not like something where catching the electromagnetic radiation is going to evoke the sun to do it more often or something. But even though the science is not sound, obviously, in Project Hail Mary, what I think it does well is it actually explains it in a really, really straightforward way, where it doesn't like try and sort of obfuscate everything. It basically says like, okay, this is how it works in this world, and this is a very easy way for it to follow on, so you can buy into the plot, essentially. Which kind of made me like hate it significantly less, because it was just kind of like, well, does it work in this world? I guess not, but like it's straightforward enough to like follow through. It doesn't try and obfuscate it, you know, from like things like Tenet does, where it tries to obfuscate it through like all this talk about things, but then it's like, okay, well, if you sit here and think about it, I guess it doesn't make sense now. It's sort of like yeah, well, it kind of like, this is just how it works, which is maybe my bias, but I'm like, yeah. I'm like, okay, I can buy into that. But the thing I found really interesting was the introduction of Rocky and their civilization, because their civilization have clearly quite a different focus on different things. So Rocky is basically an alien creature who locates things using echolocation, so it doesn't have like senses as sight. I guess it doesn't have other senses, some of the other senses as well, I don't know. It looks mainly has like a carapace of rocks, and also kind of moves like a spider. But it was really fascinating to see, because there was a really interesting line in it, or a couple of interesting lines, where basically the person, Project Hail Mary, Grace, is a scientist, so he knows all about like biology and stuff, and it turns out astrophages are basically living cells. Okay, doesn't matter. But he's like a biologist and a scientist, so he knows how to research and do experiment things. But Rocky is an engineer, or the equivalent of an engineer, basically, in their planet. So he can make all these very mechanical, architectural, like construction things and fix things. But he doesn't know how to research the planet, which was a really interesting thing, because both of those civilizations basically were under this astrophage threat, identified that this universe, for whatever reason, is not affected by the astrophage, despite the astrophages being there, and they need to find out why. And I also like read a little bit more about, like, in the movie threads, discussing about some of the differences. And I think it led to like some really interesting sort of like premise setups, where Rocky basically had been there for like years or something, but he couldn't really do anything, mainly because he wasn't a scientist. He didn't know how to research these, or like he wasn't a biologist, I guess is probably a better way to put it. Like he got there and he can sustain himself fine because he's an engineer, but he like didn't know how to like actually solve a problem. He didn't have a chemical or biological knowledge to research it any further. So once Grace comes in, it's like, okay, well, I mean, Grace probably would have survived her for some amount, but probably wouldn't have been able to do much more. And so two of them working together, which makes it work, two different alien species. And there's also a really brilliant thing, which I read that was in the book, which I wish they put in the movie, because I'm like, that's so cool to think about, is the fact that they have a discussion basically being like, I can't believe it was, you know, us two civilizations, like sort of like in parallel to a certain same level or degree of like knowledge, both of the ones to come here to do it. And then apparently Rocky's response is, well, if we had less technological knowledge or wherewithal to be able to do it, we wouldn't be able to identify this planet or be able to come here. If we had more technical knowledge than what we both currently have, then we probably wouldn't even have to travel to this planet in the first place, or this galaxy in the first place, to even find a solution. We'd just be able to solve it on our own. And I was like, oh, that's such a brilliant response. Because yes, but like it like lampshades the entire thing, but it lampshades it perfectly with a very, very reasonable explanation. Anyway, the other thing I found most interesting about Project Hail Mary, like from a theoretical standpoint, was how the civilizations diverged. And apparently Rocky's civilization, I think I called it Iridians or something, didn't know the concept of relativity and didn't know the concept of radioactivity in general, or radiation in general, which is how Rocky's crew died, is because they didn't know about radiation poisoning. He only survived because he didn't get radiation poisoning because he basically lived next to the astrophage engines or something. And I was like, that's also a very fascinating thing. But I also said to my friend afterwards at the time, I was like, relativity I can totally understand, you know, like I could totally understand them not finding out about relativity, I suppose. Even though they've probably traveled light years to get here, I mean, it's because relativity is more of like a weird consequence of expanding upon things which are kind of already known, right? Like, it's sort of like, well, I want to get from point A to point B, you know, what difference does it make if it's, you know, 1 kilometer away or 1 light year away and at the speed I'm traveling? So that was like, that seems pretty plausible. Like, I could see how they didn't discover that. But the one which kind of confused me, I was like, they didn't discover radioactivity? Like, how? At all. That one, I'm less willing to suspend my disbelief on, but I guess it could be plausible. And I think the interest there is trying to figure out what society would have looked like for them to not discover radioactivity at this point. But they did discover basically what is extremely advanced material science, because they basically, one super interesting thing is that they basically could create things out of a solid version of xenon, which is, if you don't know, a noble gas, which I think is pretty cool, because I guess it must be really inert as a solid. I don't know if actually there might be a very stable solid. Are any of the noble gases stable as solids? Let's see. Noble gas as a solid. How can pure noble gases become solids at low temperature? What interaction do they have? I wonder what the most inert... What is the most inert element? It's probably a noble gas, but iron is the most stable element. Most boring element. Anyway, not the point. But it's like, what would a society need to look like such that they could develop that? And it's obviously we had a prioritization of material sciences for one way or another instead of, you know, chemical things. So yeah, I thought that was also a really interesting tidbit from a book, which was actually touched upon a bit in the movie, but it was just so like glossed over so quickly. But yeah, I would have loved to see, and maybe that's why I want to read a book, more what Rocky's home planet was like, to be like, how did you not discover any radioactivity? You have no radioactive elements, I suppose, whatsoever. Like, you have a sun though, but I don't know, like, you never figured out how the radiation, like electromagnetic radiation, comes from the sun, I guess? Like, I guess they don't have things like maybe they don't think about ionizing rays because maybe they don't have worries of things like, you know, like developing sunburns and skin cancers because of the sun's radiation. I don't know. It is fascinating to think about though. But yeah, anyway, I didn't actually talk much about the movie. I thought it was like, I went in like, and I was really caught off guard by how like witty the movie was, or like how comedic it was being, because I was like, I thought this was going to be a super serial, super depressing drama movie, and then when the alien Rocky got introduced, I was like, whoa. Because in my mind I was kind of like hoping, oh, I really hope they don't actually show the alien because that would make it fascinating, but then it would have been a very different movie. Now I've watched it, I'm like, okay, I see why they did. But yeah, honestly, it was just incredibly heartwarming, incredibly wholesome, and it's a sort of like, I love movies where it's like, oh, what could have been, or like media properties of like, what could have been if just something slightly different happened, if, you know, they just waited a bit longer, if they just tried something else, but just the right person at the right time, they didn't say that thing, like, what would it have been like? This movie is basically the catharsis for all of that, where it's like, this is the movie it would have been because everything just happened, not perfectly, but this was a universe where it's like everything happened as it should have been, you know? To have that, it's, I would describe it, a movie with only happy endings. And it's, you might be like, that's boring. I think there is a place for such wholesome, I suppose, sci-fi stories in the first place, in what is often like dramatic, bleak, or heart-wrenching. Sometimes you just want something nice to sort of engage with. Anyway, Roku was super, super cute and adorable. I love the way he spoke. Amaze, 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 amaze. This room boring. And yeah, I kind of do want to now read the actual book itself. Fist my bump. What else does he say? I can't remember. Something like that. But yeah, it's basically a story where it's like, instead of, like, you can easily see what about a parallel dimension movie of this version happened, where it had been audiences watching it, then afterwards being like, oh, what if things were just slightly different? If things just happened a different way, then it would have all been fine. But anyway, that's a long and short of it. Project Hail Mary, I didn't talk about the plot at all. It's just a fun watch. That's what I mean to say. It's fun for the bit-to-bit moments and the yeah. I mean, I also very quickly touch upon, I like the character growth, I suppose, at the end, of him like learning basically to be a hero, like sacrificing his own survival, quote quote, in a way, for the guaranteed survival of two civilizations. And then this is Grace's development. I thought the twist of Rocky like caught me very out of nowhere, and I enjoyed it a lot. And then the twist that he wasn't a hero who was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be the one to go on it, I'll do it for the greater of humanity. He actually said no, and he was forcefully put onto the project. I was like, whoa, that's also really cool. Because then I was thinking the entire time, being like, whoa, okay. So it's like he had his development in the past of how he became a hero, but I'm like, but what's going on? Because the entire story is kind of being like, obviously setting himself up to have his hero moment. And then boom, reveal, he wasn't necessarily a hero before, but he certainly is one now. And it's very cool to see. Anyway, long and short of it, we'll go watch Project Hail Mary. I quite like it. So, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.